Hey, thank you so much for letting me hijack your group for just one night. But I think it's for a pretty good purpose. Coming up on February 11th at 6 p.m., that's a Sunday night, we have a family experience and night of worship. And we want you to come with your life group, with your friends, with your family. Invite whoever you want, because this year's theme is with Jesus. And you probably remember a few months ago the triangle that Robin and Damien preached about. And it was with Jesus, in community, and on mission. And all of those things are important and vital to our faith. But for the family experience and night of worship, and then here tonight for about 8 or 10 minutes, we just want to stick to the theme of with Jesus. My goal tonight is really just to prepare you and prepare myself and prepare our hearts for what's to come on February 11th, because we believe that God is going to do something huge in the hearts of the people at C3. So I'm going to jump right in, and I'm going to start by reading Hebrews chapter 5, verses 7 through 9. While Jesus was on earth, he offered prayers and pleadings with a loud cry and tears to the one who could rescue him from death. And God heard his prayers because of his deep reverence for God. Even though Jesus was God's son, he learned obedience from the things he suffered. In this way, God qualified him as a high priest, and he became the source of eternal salvation for all those who obey him. Hebrews 5, 7 through 9. Jesus stayed connected to his source. It says right there, Jesus offered prayers and pleadings with a loud cry and tears to the one who could rescue him. That shows such a desperation that Jesus had for staying connected to God, for staying connected to his source, because he knew that his power came from God and God alone. Jesus knew that God and God alone was his source when he was feeling self-doubt, when he was feeling anxiousness, when he was feeling empty. He knew that God was the only one that could provide the power to fill him back up and get him back on the right track. Jesus knew that staying connected to God, staying connected to his source, was the only way he could fulfill his mission. And not only the ultimate mission of the cross, but also the day-to-day grind, which we can relate with. We have a day-to-day grind, and life is hard. Things get thrown at us each and every day, and we feel kind of beat up sometimes. There's a day-to-day grind, and Jesus experienced it as well. And we see a little glimpse of Jesus' day-to-day grind in Luke chapter 5, verses 12 through 16. And during this account, Jesus healed a man with leprosy. And right here, the secret was out about Jesus right now. The secret was out. The word had spread. People knew that God's power was moving in him and through him, and they wanted to come and see and experience Jesus. And in verse 15 of Luke chapter 5, it even says, "The report of his power spread even faster, and vast crowds came to hear him preach and to be healed from their diseases." Jesus was preaching and healing on a daily basis. He was dealing with people's problems. He was listening. He was healing. He was speaking truth day in and day out. And I don't know about you, but that sounds exhausting. Even our days are exhausting. We're dealing with people at Walmart. We're dealing with people in traffic. We're dealing with people at work, at school. But Jesus here, in a very relational way, he was touching people, meeting them right where they were at, and touching them in a very relational and spiritual way. And that can take its toll on anyone, in a mental way, even in a physical way, and definitely in a spiritual way. But we look in Luke chapter 5, verse 16, and we see kind of the secret to Jesus' success, how he could do this day in and day out, and stick with that daily grind. And even when he didn't feel like it, he would do it anyway, because he had a little bit of a secret to his success. And it's in Luke chapter 5, verse 16, and it says simply, "But Jesus often withdrew to the wilderness to pray." Jesus often went to the wilderness and prayed. That means Jesus took time out and spent time alone with God so he could get filled back up to do the work of God. He stayed connected to his source. Because he stayed connected to God, he was able to endure even the worst sufferings. He was able to die on the cross for me and for you and for the sins of the world, because he had the power of God in him, because he stayed connected to God. And because of this, back to Hebrews 5, verse 9, and because of this, God qualified him as a perfect high priest, and he became the source of eternal salvation for all those who obey him. Jesus, God's Son, is not only our example, he's our source. As Christians, we are to pattern our lives after the life of Jesus Christ. We're supposed to follow in his footsteps as his disciples. And that is why it's so vital, it is so important to spend time with Jesus on a daily basis. Because if we're not in his word, if we're not reading his word, if we're not in prayer, how are we going to know where to step, where to walk? How are we going to know how he lived in order to know how we should live? If we're not spending time with him each and every day, it is vital for us to stay connected to Jesus so that we can not only survive the day-to-day grind that we talked about earlier, but so we can also fulfill our ultimate mission, because God has an ultimate mission for us as well. And that's to tell others about him. The Great Commission, Matthew chapter 28, to go out into all nations and share the gospel and baptize them in the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit, and teach them how to live. That is our mission as Christians. But we are not able to do that if we're not connected to our source. Because it's not by our power that we can do anything, but it's by the power of God working in us and through us that we can do that. But as we pour ourselves out to others, it's vital to spend time with Jesus, because we need to fill ourselves back up. And we can't do that on our own. We can only do that when we're spending time with Jesus. Remember, it's not by our power that we can do this. It's only by staying connected to our source and letting his power work through us. So as a group right now, I would love for you to read John chapter 15, verses 1 through 17. And it talks a little bit more about staying connected to Jesus, our source. And I've provided your life group leaders with 4 questions, and I hope that these questions will lead you into a great discussion. And I encourage you to be honest with one another. We all struggle with this. We're all in the same boat together. Spending time with Jesus is important, but also we get distracted, and it can be very, very difficult at times. So encourage one another, be honest with one another, and pray for one another to be with Jesus on a daily basis. Thank you guys so much for letting me be part of your group. And I just pray right now for your discussion that it will be incredible and lead you in the right direction.